Celebrations going on in Athens tonight, because just when you thought the Eurozone debt crisis was under control, a major spanner in the works from Greece. The Prime Minister, George Papandreou, sent shockwaves around global markets this morning with the announcement that he's putting the latest EU debt deal to a public vote.
We have a duty to highlight the citizens' role and responsibility, showing in practice not only our respect, but also our fundamental belief that the citizen is the source of our strength and our very existence. This, dear colleagues, is done via a referendum.
Well, just take a look at how markets reacted to that this Tuesday. All of them down across the board, and the euro currency itself also taking a major hit. So why all the disappointment? Well, a no vote from a referendum in Greece could, first of all, scupper weeks of tough negotiations between member states. And the move has also prompted political turmoil at home. There have been calls for the Prime Minister, George Papandreou, to resign, and he will be facing a vote of no confidence on Friday. Well, there are even fears his government might not last the week. All of this, of course, coming at a pretty bad time for the Eurozone itself. Don't forget that the G20 kicks off later this week, and EU leaders had been hoping for some kind of relief after last week's deal. Well, the French President Nicolas Sarkozy has spoken in the last hour. He says that the deal reached last week in Brussels is the only option on the table. It is the only one that will help solve the Eurozone crisis. So is it back to the drawing board for EU leaders, and what can be done to end this crisis? Joining me to discuss tonight in Athens, Nikos Vernikos is president of the International Chamber of Commerce. In London, Jonas Perele-Plesner is a senior policy fellow at the think tank, the European Council on Foreign Relations. My guests here in the studio tonight are Sofiane Aboura. He's a professor of finance at Paris Dauphine University, and Stefan Simons is the correspondent in Paris for the online version of the German newspaper Der Spiegel. And in Washington tonight, Xu Ting, senior project manager for the Bertelsmann Foundation for North America. Many thanks indeed to you all for being with us tonight. I'd like to start in Athens, if I may. Nikos Vernikos. I guess the most pressing issue right now is whether or not Papandreou and his government will last the week.
Good evening, Paris from Athens. Papandreou gambled last night by declaring that he's going to make a referendum, and following this declaration, everybody criticized him, including his own Socialist Party. We had two MPs of the Socialist Party who have resigned, so Papandreou now has only 151 members of parliament still with him, and most probably he'll be obliged to resign tomorrow or latest after tomorrow.
And what will happen then, in your view?
What will happen then? The Socialist Party has the majority of the Greek parliament, so it's up to the Socialist Party to decide on whether they are going to support another Socialist Party member, or if they are going to support an outsider, a personality which will get support from other political parties too.
And what if the EU and the IMF say, as a result of that, no more money for Greece?
According to the news, the first news we received from the European Union leaders, everybody was shocked and impressed by this Papandreou decision, because they were strongly believing that following the decisions of October 27 and 28, everything has been agreed, and we were in the middle of implementing a new agreement. But unfortunately, the social upset in Greece is so strong that Papandreou decided to ask for a vote of confidence for himself and a referendum from the Greek party, which for the time being, it seems it is a boomerang for him.
OK, all right. Stefan Simons, let's talk a bit more about Papandreou's motives, because we all saw him at that meeting in Brussels last week with Angela Merkel, with Nicolas Sarkozy, with Silvio Berlusconi. There was no hint he was going to do this. Where has this come from?
Well, good question. Probably rather for Nikos than for us here in Paris. I mean, he took everyone by surprise. His own followers, his own party, his own cabinet included. So he must be in a position of really facing the wall. And probably the only thing he thought was to retake the initiative at all cost. A vote of confidence is one thing. That might, just get Greece another premier. But to put this before the Greek people leaves probably no way than a very, very strong oshi, meaning no. And that, of course, is the beginning of the end for Greece.
What will it mean if the referendum, first of all, is due to take place in early 2012? That is assuming that Papandreou's government survives early next year. What if there is a no vote? What are the possible scenarios if that happens?
Well, in that case, I think that the bondholders of the Greek debt will stop lending money to Greece, and they will have a real default. And they will have no choice than accepting a new package, a rescue package, or having an exit strategy outside the Eurozone with recovering their new drachma, with the opportunities but as well the cost associated with this strategy.
But how would that even happen? I mean, there is absolutely no precedent for that happening to a Eurozone member, is it?
No, of course. So this is the problem, because it is not for the moment possible for a member state to go outside the Eurozone without doing a formal request from this country to the other member state, and from the member state to accept this possibility. However, he opens the door of such a possibility with the assumption that his government is not changed during this week, of course.
All right, let's go to London. Jonas Perello-Plesner's there. He's from the think tank European Council of Foreign Relations. Thanks for being with us. This really shows, doesn't it, the impotence of decision-making at a European level, because you can have as many summits as you like. When it comes down to it, it's people in member states who decide what happens.
Yeah, well, good evening here from London. You're very right about that. Definitely there is, and we've seen that before, but not as I think is an important crisis as this. We've seen sort of no's to earlier treaties, like where we had both sort of French no's and Dutch no's and Irish and Danish earlier on, but these were all cases of sort of treaty changes in the European Union. Here, it's sort of where it's betting against the markets, and of course makes a completely a different scenario. And another stress test for Europe. Everybody thought, well, now we've sort of passed the curve, and then Greece comes out with this sort of surprise referendum. So you can say it's probably a positive thing for Greek democracy, but a very sort of difficult thing and a quite hard time further on for the euro.
Should Greece leave the Eurozone?
I mean, that's, of course, Greece's completely own decision. That would probably, at least if it's in a disorderly way, have very sort of devastating consequences. So, I mean, that's where the whole assumption until now has been working on packages that could sort of help Greece sort of stay in through these. Of course, putting this second package to a public referendum, and in the case of a no, sort of will definitely ask other questions of what in the case of no, but I think there's still some time there before we're there.
Now, we've had reaction from states in the Eurozone. I mentioned earlier what Sarkozy had to say. France and Germany have called this decision irresponsible. Spain says it's not the right decision for Europe. Jean-Claude Juncker, the chair of the Eurozone, has also criticised the decision. He says he can't rule out a default. Why do you think Papandreou chose to do this now? And is this a real slap in the face for Europe?
Well, there's an element of, you can say, sort of democracy. This is really, really big things that are happening in Europe, and Europe has always been suffering from this sort of democratic deficit. So the idea of putting big European questions to a referendum, and particularly something that touches the Greeks so profoundly, you could say, is not new. The fact what's new here is that he does it without any warning to other European leaders, and everybody thought we have a plan. So there's a lot of loss of faith for them as well. Sarkozy was calling Hu Jintao, the Chinese president, sort of saying, well, we now have a package, do have faith in the European Union. And a couple of days later down the road, a referendum is called in Greece, which throws sand into the complete machinery.
Sofiane.
I believe that he wants to solve the Greek paradox, because the vast majority of Greeks wants to belong to Europe and Eurozone, but the very same majority reject the rescue package. This is contradictory. For that reason, he asked the Greek people, and the political party and the Conservative Party to take a decision and to vote.
And that's right, isn't it, Nikos Vernikos? This is quite a shrewd move on the part of Papandreou, because he's been looking increasingly isolated of yet. He's the one driving through these austerity measures, looking like he's completely beholden to the EU and the IMF. Is this a case of Greece trying to seize back the democratic initiative, you know, after all these decisions being made in foreign capitals by other foreign leaders?
Europe is sinking, and European leaders still need to get even more close their act together. The European leaders clearly failed to see that Greece cannot possibly service the huge debt, no matter the harshness of the measures and the economic depression forced upon the Greek people. So here we are in the time of truth. And although the majority of the Greek people understand and wants to reform, things are running so fast, they are changing every day, and this is because of lack of leadership, both in Greece and in Europe.
Well, but Nikos Vernikos, if I just want to add a word here, I think patience is going to be running out, not only among the leaders, and as we have seen today, in reaction to that surprise decision coming from Athens, but even among the population. I mean, you know, just as Professor just said, Europe has good markers, but the performance of our political leaders, the performance of the whole political system has been dismal in the view of most of our people in Europe. So adding to this Greek decision coming out of the blue, I think it puts the whole European project on a very, very difficult path to the future.
And Nikos Vernikos, also, if I could just add, you know, you're a businessman. You've worked in business. You work for the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, Greece is going to have to get its finances in order at some stage, isn't it? I mean, when you're running a business, you don't owe people such huge amounts of money. Well, I just wonder what your thoughts on that were.
My thoughts are similar to the thoughts of the majority, of the great majority of the Greek people. We have to reform. We've made big mistakes and omissions in the past. And now it is the time of truth. The party is over, and we have to take the measures imposed by our creditors, because this is to the benefit of the Greek people and of the European people as a whole. Greeks believe that they have to stay in the euro. Greeks, they don't like to hear the scenario of leaving the euro. And in spite of all these difficulties, I'm optimistic that at the end we are going to go through this difficult path. And
but what is the alternative? If Greece wants to stay in the euro, it has to abide by these rules. I mean, last week we were saying this was a pretty good deal for Greece. It was going to have its debts pretty much cut in half. I mean, you can't have it both ways, can you?
You are completely right, and as I told you, the majority of Greeks believe that. Our problem is the lack of leadership. This is the main problem, and I believe that through this crisis, things are going to change radically, including the leadership of the political parties, and new leaders will drive Greece through the right path to recovery.
Well, it's a profession of hope there from
Yes.
Athens.
Where are the new leaders? This is a problem.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. Who are the new leaders?
Yeah.
Who can? The opposition doesn't seem to be coming up with any
No.
ideas at the moment.
No.
Who can lead Greece out of this mess?
But that's why I said, when I say Greece lacks leadership, it lacks leadership both in the government and in the opposition. But I believe there are sound forces which will appear following these extraordinary hours which we are facing today, not only for Greece, but for Europe and the whole world.
Well, but they better show up by tomorrow evening, when Mr. Papandreou is scheduled to come to Cannes to face harsh criticisms from both Mrs. Merkel and President Sarkozy. So if he's still premier by then, I mean he has his hands tied. He comes to Cannes. Might be he can clear up our understanding on his very personal motives why he took this very strange decision. But in terms of room for maneuver, I don't see how he can move tomorrow night.
I think they will try to, Chancellor Merkel and President Sarkozy, they will try to use their bargaining power to force him, if he's not resigning, to adopt the rescue package in any cases. Otherwise, they will increase level of uncertainty of the Eurozone just before the summit of G20.
Yeah, the G20 is coming up at the end of the week. Let's not forget. Nikos Vernikos, sorry to keep picking on you, but you are in Greece. You are where everything's happening at the moment. I just wondered what you thought about what the French president had to say last week, just after that deal was reached in Brussels. He said, look, Greece should never have been allowed to join the Eurozone. They misled us about their figures, and this is why we're in the mess we're in now. It should never have been allowed to happen. What are your views on that?
The French president said what most people believe. It was the first time for maybe many Europeans to hear that, but it was something that we in Greece have heard in the past repeatedly from the media, and the fact that we heard it from President Sarkozy is another event that shocked us, and I believe will make us to react in the proper way.
But was he right to say that? Do you agree with him?
No, I don't agree with him the way he put the things, because we Greeks believe that Greece entered the European Union and the Eurozone for political reasons. And the European Union is not an organization just to measure how many kilos of potatoes go with how many kilos of tomatoes. There are political reasons which played a big role, and these were the reasons that both the European Union and the Eurozone has accepted Greece.
All right, Nikos Vernikos, just very quickly, Stefan, before we go to break.
Yeah, well, I think that this kind of an attitude won't go a long way. I mean, we in Germany have had a long debate about Greece. So why support Greece? We Germans have done the homework. We've paid our taxes. Greece hasn't done so. So I think this will just nail down the statement which Sarkozy came out with last week. The Greeks should have never been inside the Europe. Problem is, as the professor said earlier, how are we going to get out?
Right, quite. On that note, let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll have the latest international headlines for you and the second part of tonight's debate. Don't go away.